Could we have the next item, please?
Item number 12, informational presentation on the proposed draft Treasure Island Development Authority fiscal year 2015-16 budget and fiscal year 2016-17 budget.
Mr. Beck, are you presenting this item?
Yes, I am. The draft budget for fiscal year 15-16 and 16-17 was included in your package for this month. Our presentation this evening is just informational, and we'll be coming back next month with the final budget for board recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. First, a little bit of information about the current year budget and the progress to date in fiscal year 14-15. The budget for this fiscal year was the first budget year in which we projected expenses to exceed revenues. That was due to increased expenses on the engineering and development side, but a balanced budget was adopted by the board utilizing fund balances from prior fiscal year ending 2012 and 2013. It should be noted that the fiscal year 14-15 budget also includes some unusual revenues and expenses compared to prior years, because it included offsetting revenue and expenses in the amount of $5,750,000, which represent TICD's obligation to make a payment towards the local match for the westbound ramps project within 30 days of the initial closing. In fiscal year 15-16, they will be obligated to make a second installment on that project, but it will be for an amount of roughly $2.875 million, which is reflected in both the revenues and expenses in the coming fiscal year budget. In looking at current year revenues, the two largest revenue sectors in Tida's budget are commercial revenues and residential revenues from the residential leasing agreement with John Stewart Company. The residential revenues this year have been impacted by two large categories of extraordinary expenses. First, last fall, John Stewart Company conducted moisture surveys of all of the units in their inventory, and they identified a number of units with moisture control problems that they addressed. Then the second is they've been preparing the units for the relocation of YBI residents. Combined, these two categories have resulted in more than $1 million worth of expenses beyond their prior fiscal year expenses. To help mitigate the impact of those expenses on current year revenues, we've authorized John Stewart Company to tap their reserve account, which will be replenished over coming years per the provisions of the contract. Commercial revenues, on the other hand, are projected to exceed the revenue projections in the current budget by more than $500,000. On the expenses side, we also experienced some unanticipated expenses this current fiscal year. Most significantly, based on discussions with the Public Utilities Commission after the budget was adopted, we revised the utility rates effective December 1st. Although some of those costs were passed on to lessees, our work order with the PUC also needed to be increased to address the change in rates. We also experienced some additional costs for utility permit modifications in anticipation of the pending property transfer from the Navy that were not included in the original budget. These additional costs were offset by salary savings and under expenditures on relocation payments and consultant services, so the gross expenditures this year are expected to be within budget. We are, over the next month, we'll be revising our year-end closing estimates, but we do project that we will end fiscal year 14-15 with a positive fund balance. Regarding the budget for next year, the revenues for next year are projected to be up slightly over the current year, led again by revenues from commercial leasing and the cellular agreements that you heard earlier this evening, making up for more than offsetting projected drops in residential leasing revenues and special event revenues. We're also projecting increased expenses for utilities and new stormwater permitting requirements, increases in the work order with the Treasure Island Mobility Management Agency, and a modest increase in the facilities maintenance budget. These expense increase will be partially offset by an elimination of a one-time payment that is in our current fiscal year budget for East Bay electrical facilities, and a decrease in the projected relocation-related expenses next year. The net budget is slightly lower for next year, primarily as a result of the decreased ramp payments that are in next year's budget, and we're currently projecting a balanced budget, assuming the use of the fiscal year end balance of some $500,000 from fiscal year ending 2014, and a projected fiscal year 2015 end balance. As we refine our budget projections for year-end closing, if the year-end balance is less than currently projected, a contribution from the developer would be required to balance the projected 15-16 budget per the disposition development agreement. That concludes my informational presentation, but I'd be happy to take any questions you have on the project.
Okay, thank you.